Our MC is shocked as if someone exposed his search history because he reincarnated as the NTR villain in an erotic harem otome game. It all starts with a guy immersed in his favorite game, a title where the main appeal is building a harem with the heroines. As a self-proclaimed man of culture, that's exactly what draws him in. But after a long gaming session, a crippling headache hits him and he decides to lie down for a quick nap. When he wakes up, he's shocked to find himself in a luxurious, unfamiliar room. Confused, he stumbles to a mirror and is stunned by the reflection staring back. It isn't his face. It belongs to Xenon, the most hated villain in the game. In the game's lore, Xenon was once best friends with the hero Lion. Everything changed after Lion succeeded in sealing the Demon King beneath the earth. Right after that victory, Xenon turned on him, systematically stealing every single heroine, leaving Lion with no one. Consumed by rage and jealousy, Lion eventually freed the Demon King, leading to the world's destruction. The final battle was set between the two former friends. Our protagonist is in despair. He somehow died in his sleep and reincarnated as the game's ultimate villain, a misogynist who preys on women. Fighting back tears, he wishes he had become the beloved hero Lion. As he spirals, a beautiful maid named Levi enters the room and immediately apologizes for barging in. Panicking, she nervously asks for punishment and starts to undress. The MC is horrified. Levi simply leans against the wall, saying she's prepared for the usual. That's when he notices the welts and scars on her back. Realizing Xenon was violent with her, he finds it disgusting. He quickly takes her dress from the bed and covers her up. Levi is taken aback by her master's strange behavior, but the MC has more pressing concerns. He needs to know the date. When he asks, Levi tells him it's the 5th of April, year 101 of the Slayer calendar. This is a crucial detail. In the game, this is the day of the entrance ceremony at the Royal Academy, long before Xenon and Lion became enemies. He decides to take it easy and head to the academy tomorrow. Levi then asks if he won't be training that morning. Confused, the MC learns it's Xenon's daily habit. To avoid suspicion, he agrees to train and heads to the grounds. Seeing the training area in shambles gives him a clue to Xenon's true strength. He picks up a sword and begins, and surprisingly, his body moves with familiarity, as if he's always used it. After swordsmanship, he tests his magic. Raising his hand, a dark whirlwind erupts from his palm, shattering targets. He possesses Xenon's dark magic. The MC realizes Xenon must have been incredibly hardworking. He just can't understand why such a diligent guy would choose to be a womanizer and steal the hero's girls. He decides that, as Xenon, he'll avoid the heroines, help Lion, and simply aid him in defeating the Demon King. After training, Levi brings him water. Xenon takes it and thanks her. Levi freezes. It's the first time her master has ever shown gratitude. He further surprises her by expressing genuine appreciation for her devotion. Filled with unexpected happiness, a soft spot in her heart opens for the first time. The next morning, Xenon boards a carriage for the academy. Levi gets teary-eyed, wishing him a safe journey. Inside the carriage, Xenon solidifies his resolve. He has no intention of stealing the hero's girls. He's a one-woman man and is determined to ignore the original storyline. Hours later, he arrives at the academy. As a fan of the game, he's thrilled to be in the very place the story unfolds. He heads inside, nervous, and makes his way to the auditorium for the entrance ceremony. Soon, an aged teacher announces the top students from the entrance exam. In 5th place is Shell, a beauty with thick thighs and Lion's childhood friend. 4th is Nagisa, the long-haired daughter of a master swordsman, a fighter even better than Lion. 3rd is 8th, a blonde noblewoman with a cardinal for a father. Xenon remembers she's one of the heroines the real Xenon corrupted. He's confident that future is now impossible. Lost in thought about how attractive the heroines are, he starts second-guessing his decision to avoid them. The teacher announces the runner-up, Xenon. He doesn't hear his name, too busy thinking. Annoyed by the perceived disrespect, the teacher angrily yells again. The class finds his behavior disgusting. Xenon nervously realizes he missed his cue. Students gossip about his infamous noble family, calling it evil and mentioning their assassination of the previous king. Panic sets in. He's already drawn unwanted attention. The teacher scolds him harshly, warning him about his rotten behavior. After the scolding, Xenon chooses not to stand and answer, thinking it would only embarrass him further. He quietly apologizes, but the silence in the room is deafening. The heroines eye him coldly. Even Even after his apology, the teacher keeps scolding him. Internally, he's terrified. Everyone is looking at him as the villain. The eventual teacher lets it slide for the celebratory occasion, but warns him to improve his character. Xenon feels a wave of relief, hoping the tension will die down. It doesn't. At that moment, the first place position is announced. Lion Brave, the game's protagonist, born with the power to seal the Demon King, answers with overwhelming confidence. Xenon stares in awe at the character he controlled 1,000,000 times, but Lion immediately meets his gaze with pure disdain, surprising Xenon, who hasn't done anything yet. As the new student representative, Lion gives a speech with unwavering confidence, vowing to get stronger and fight evil, even if that evil is a classmate. He locks his sharp gaze on Xenon, who can already sense the deep hostility. After the ceremony, students head to class. Xenon remains seated, thinking the game's scenario must have changed for Lion to hate him so much already. He decides to not dwell on it. His focus is a peaceful school life, which means working with Lion. Moments later, a beautiful teacher enters the room. He recognizes her as another girl the real Xenon trapped. The realization strengthens his resolve, but one question nags him. Why did Xenon do all those evil things? Later, after school, Xenon keeps to himself, shunned because of his family's notorious reputation. He doesn't care. His concern is planning his next move. He arrives at his father's Dubai-style mansion. Levi is overjoyed to see him, but informs him his father, Gandalf, wants to see him immediately. A cold chill runs down his spine. Gandalf is known as the ruler of the night, a true villain who controls the underworld. The protagonist dreads meeting this monster, but he has to play the part. Reluctantly, he heads to the office. The moment he opens the door, a bloody chain wraps around him, binding him tight. From the shadows, Gandalf emerges, furious his son placed second. He brutally stomps on Xenon until his face is bloodied, calling him a pathetic disappointment. He warns that if Xenon doesn't take top position in the next exam, this beating will seem like child's play. With a villainous laugh, Gandalf announces he'll be away for work and leaves. Xenon, badly injured, staggers into the hallway and collapses. Levi finds him, rushes over and feeds him medicine to speed up his healing. Later that night, Xenon awakes in his room, his injuries healed. He's surprised to find Levi sleeping peacefully on his lap. Her care touches him deeply. He realizes how truly good she is, and it makes him feel terrible remembering how the real Xenon treated her like trash. Thinking about the abuse Levi endured, he concluded that Xenon's wicked path was a result of his psychopathic father. Enduring years of abuse must have unhinged him, leading him to betray his best friend and hoard all the heroines out of jealousy for the love Lion received. The protagonist realizes his first task isn't helping Lion, but defeating his own maniacal father. To live freely, he must defy both the game's script and his father's evil will. He gets to work, jotting down everything he knows about the game, future scenarios, and the locations of crucial hidden items. He considers running away, but his father would just send assassins. Plus, deviating from the game's path would make it impossible to predict Leon's actions, risking the hero's loss to the Demon King and the end of the world. The next morning, Xenon knows he needs to get stronger. Checking his status, he sees his swordsmanship, dark magic, and training are all at level 20. He needs better equipment and items to learn new skills. Some items can be bought, but rare ones require funds and auctions. He's determined not to take anything meant for Leon that could hinder his final battle. While strategizing, Levi brings breakfast with recovery effects. Xenon thanks her. She tries to brush it off, but he thanks her again. She blushes intensely, cries, gets a nosebleed, and runs out in an emotional outburst. It proves the real Xenon had girls who loved him, making the protagonist wonder why he ever needed to steal anyone else's. Shortly after, he meets Zeus, the stern butler, who questions why he skipped his morning training. Xenon assures him he has his own plans to get stronger, dismissing simple practice swings as ineffective. A week passes since the entrance ceremony. At school, nothing changes. Leon continues to glare at Xenon with pure hatred. Xenon has grown used to it and is patiently waiting for a specific day. Luck finally shines on him when the teacher announces a dungeon exploration activity. Xenon is excited, but that excitement dies when the teacher says they must form parties. A complete loner with no friends, Xenon is left standing alone at the dungeon entrance while everyone else quickly teams up. The teacher grows worried about Zenon attempting to solo the dungeon, but he insists he'll be fine. Suddenly, Nagisa approaches him and suggests they team up. Zenon is shocked she'd want to pair with him, but he agrees since she's the only one willing. However, knowing she's a main heroine, he reminds himself to keep interactions to a minimum. Before they begin, the teacher warns the students about the monsters inside and reminds them to protect themselves. Parties will enter at 10-minute intervals, and any items or materials collected will affect their grades. As soon as the exploration begins, every party wants to enter first, leading to arguments among the groups. Zenon and Nagisa just watch from the sidelines. Fed up with the delay, Nagisa ditches Zenon and decides to solo the dungeon instead. As she walks inside, Zenon gets mad and yells at the remaining students, blaming their indecision for driving his partner away. His outburst frightens them, so they quickly settle the next entry order with rock, paper, scissors. The teacher overhears Zenon's commanding tone and approaches him, genuinely impressed by his leadership skills. She apologizes for misjudging him based on his appearance and family background. When it's finally her turn, she advises him to turn back if things get too dangerous. Zenon thanks her, surprised by her sudden kindness, but a flashback reminds him that in the game, the real Zenon tortured this same teacher so badly she ended up broken. He silently vows to never let that happen. Inside the dungeon, Zenon easily handles the slimes without breaking a sweat. After defeating them, he collects their cores and notes that the dungeon layout matches the game perfectly. Since this is a tutorial dungeon, he's confident he can solo it. But the more slimes he kills, the more they multiply, forcing him to keep fighting his way upward. When he clears the bottom floor, he gains access to the second level, where he finds 3 injured classmates sitting on the ground. He's surprised anyone could get hurt in such an easy dungeon, but he minds his own business and walks past them. On the third floor, the number of injured students has doubled. Among them, he spots Eighth, the beautiful blonde healer, tirelessly treating everyone. She's a saint whose mana never dries out, no matter how many people she heals. Zenon catches himself staring at her beauty and quickly snaps back to reality, reminding himself not to fall for any heroine. Just as he turns to leave, Eighth calls his name. When he responds, she asks if he needs healing. He declines, pointing out it's just a tutorial dungeon. He finds it irritating that she spent all her time healing instead of advancing. Eighth explains she believes it's more important for everyone to move forward together rather than reaching the goal alone. Zenon realizes she's the classic goody two-shoes type who risks everything to save others. Her saintly behavior is admirable, but also frustrating. He decides to walk away rather than engage further, believing it's Leon's job to handle his own heroines. Still, he offers her one piece of friendly advice: help people in moderation. Minutes later, Zenon reaches the 4th floor, where he easily dispatches some monstrous bunnies. While collecting their cores, he assumes Leon, Shell, and Nagisa have already made it to the final floor. He figures Leon must have defeated the dungeon boss with his harem's help, but then he hears a scream for help. Zenon runs towards the sound and peeks around a corner to find a bruised Leon and an injured girl named Alicia facing the dungeon's final boss, the gargoyle. Zenon is confused. The gargoyle is supposed to be on the lowest level. According to the story, Leon, Shell, and Nagisa were meant to fight this monster, and that battle would awaken the power of Leon's hero blood. In the original scenario, the gargoyle slaughtered several classmates, including the girls, leaving Leon devastated and pushing him to train harder. That tragedy was essential for his growth, fueling his hatred of the demon race and maturing him into the hero he needed to become. Zenon realizes that if he intervenes now, he might sabotage Leon's entire character development and risk the hero losing to the Demon King later. It's a difficult choice, but he decides to look away and let Leon face the battle alone, but he just can't do it. Right before the gargoyle unleashes a devastating attack, Zenon steps in to help. The beast roars in anger, swearing Zenon won't get away. Zenon just laughs. This so-called powerful monster is just a tutorial boss he's fought over 1,000 times in his previous life. He knows the gargoyle inside and out. It has high physical stats, but low magic resistance. The key is attacking with magic. As the beast flexes its strength, Zenon calmly assesses the situation, recalling one crucial detail: the weak point. He leaps into the air, channels magic into his blade, and stabs the gargoyle right under the chin. The monster crashes to the ground and vanishes, leaving behind its valuable core. Xenon takes it, but worry creeps in. He has no idea if defeating this event monster will change the game's story. He decides to focus on the fact that he saved lives. He approaches the boy and girl he rescued and asks if they're okay. The boy says yes, but Xenon notices they're out of healing potions. He hands the boy 2 of his own. The boy is shocked by the kindness, asking if it's really okay, since he's just a useless nobody. Xenon assures him it's fine. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the boy falls to the ground and begs for forgiveness, blaming himself for their predicament. He says if only he were stronger, this wouldn't have happened. Sensing his strong sense of responsibility, Xenon encourages him to train harder so he can protect himself and his friends next time. Touched, the boy promises to become as strong as Xenon someday. He apologizes for misjudging Xenon based on his creepy face and family reputation, admitting Xenon is actually a good person. Embarrassed by the sincerity, Xenon pulls out a monster-repelling incense from his bag and hands it to him, explaining it will protect them until they leave. The boy promises to repay the favor someday. Xenon walks away with a smile, telling him to repay it when he's successful. Continuing downward, Xenon easily electrocutes a group of monster dogs. When he finally reaches the lowest floor, the playground of the wise, he's surprised to find Leon, Nagisa, and another girl already there. Xenon politely asks if they're okay. Leon immediately gets hostile, demanding to know how Xenon knew they were in danger and accusing him of being responsible. Xenon has no idea what he's talking about and explains he encountered a powerful monster and assumed they might have as well. The girls are shocked that Xenon faced the same monster and came out completely unscathed. Leon breaks down, guilt-ridden that he let the monster escape and it must have attacked other students. The girls try to console him, but he's inconsolable, blaming his own weakness. Watching Leon crumble, Xenon worries about the consequences of his actions. In the original game, Leon let the monster escape, but only after it killed a classmate, triggering his dramatic growth through regret. With those changes, Xenon is in over his head, uncertain if Leon will still experience that same powerful development. After an awkward silence, Xenon decides to move on. As he turns to leave, Leon suddenly stands and calls out. Xenon tells him to make it quick. Leon hesitates, then silently thanks him for giving medicine to the injured classmates and cleaning up his mess. He bows respectfully, surprising Xenon after all the hostility, but right after expressing gratitude, Leon switches back to his angry self, warning Xenon that he'll never forgive an evildoer like him and hopes he gets what he deserves someday. He storms off despite his companion's attempts to stop him. Xenon is puzzled by the sudden shift, but doesn't dwell on it. Just as he's about to continue, Nagisa calls him back. She desperately wants to know if he was the one who defeated the gargoyle. When Xenon indirectly confirms it, she smiles knowingly, saying she suspected all along. His aura felt different, and her eyes never fail her. Before leaving, she asks him to spar sometime, explaining that only by fighting strong opponents can one truly grow stronger. After everyone leaves, Xenon ventures deeper into the lowest level until he finds a golden throne. On it sits a chest filled with gold coins. He picks one up, thrilled. This coin is the only proof the dungeon has been cleared. If he had left without it, like Leon and the girls did, the floor wouldn't count as cleared. Continuing his exploration, he notices a misplaced tile on the wall and presses it, revealing a hidden door. Inside, he finds piles of gold coins and other treasures. This secret room, the Nouveau Riz, normally doesn't appear in the game until after the dungeon has been cleared at least twice. Xenon starts looting everything and luckily finds a magic bag with unlimited storage capacity. With these treasures, he's essentially set for life. He begins stuffing everything into the bag, but then feels an intense dark aura behind him. Turning around, he spots a glowing sword stabbed in the middle of the treasure pile. He immediately recognizes it as the Demon Blade Heavenly Cutter, a Japanese-style katana. This weapon surpasses even the ultimate holy sword, Brave, and can only be obtained in the latter half of the game. In his former life, this was the weapon he always used. Picking it up, he's shocked that he finds it here. Then he notices something he missed earlier. The entire room is filled with items based on his save data. This can only mean one thing. He's now living in the reality of his saved game world. Someone must have intentionally reincarnated him here, bringing his save data to life. He has no idea if it was a god or a devil, but he can't stop wondering what their goal is. A while later, Xenon exits the dungeon to find his classmates and teacher waiting outside. He tosses the gold coin proof to the teacher, and everyone is stunned. The teacher analyzes it and confirms Xenon has cleared the Sage Playground dungeon. The students, including Leon, are in shock. As a reward, the teacher grants Xenon permission to explore other dungeons, but advises him not to push himself too hard. The next day at school, Xenon realizes he'll need companions. There are limits to going solo. Most of the equipment and weapons from his treasure haul can't be used until he raises his skill proficiency, which requires clearing high-level dungeons he can't manage alone. He also needs someone who can purify status effects like poison and paralysis in emergencies. The problem is he's socially awkward with no friends. Unlike Leon, who's always surrounded by girls, Xenon's presence irritates his classmates. That leaves him with two options: hire mercenaries or buy a slave. He remembers a side heroine who works as a mercenary, someone he could hire with money. But mercenaries aren't exactly loyal. As a religious guy, he finds the idea of purchasing a slave unholy. Yet, with no other choice, he feels he must do what's necessary. Later that day, Xenon heads to a slave auction. He's welcomed as the son of royalty by a greasy fat man who even offers him champagne. Xenon is uncomfortable, finding it repulsive to be among slave traders, but he sees it as the price he has to pay for a chance to defeat his vicious father. The auction begins. 3 slaves are presented, a macho guy and 2 girls. The crowd bids wildly, but Xenon stays calm, carefully assessing each option. Next, a blue-haired boy is presented with a starting price of 100,000 gold coins. The crowd goes wild again, shouting bids. Still, Xenon refuses to bid. He hasn't seen the perfect slave he came for. His pockets are filled with gold coins from the dungeon, enough to buy 1 or 2 slaves. But he isn't looking for anyone. He's specifically searching for someone with strong combat skills. To ensure he makes the right choice, he brought a special gadget from his treasure pile, the God's Eye. With the God's Eye fixed to his right eye, Xenon can now precisely appraise any monster or person's abilities. He scans the next batch of slaves presented, but their skills are disappointingly low. Unable to find what he's looking for, he decides to head home, but the announcer stops him dead in his tracks, revealing there's one last slave for the day. Even more shocking, this slave is from a rare race known as demi-humans. Xenon is beyond stunned when he sees a small blonde girl with horns named Ula, the White Ogre. With years of playing this game, Xenon knows for a fact that Ula isn't a character from this world. She's from another game made by the same developers called Warlord of the Holy Sea. He's completely confused about what's happening. While the other bidders fiercely compete for Ula, Xenon's mind races trying to connect the dots between both games. He finally concludes that both games must originally be set in the same world. As the bidding price rises to $5 million, Xenon uses the God's Eye to analyze her abilities: physical reinforcement at level 11, super strength at 13, and hammer mastery at 9. 3 innate combat skills. She's exactly the companion he's been searching for, but a concern lingers. If both game worlds are truly connected, Ula should be following the scenario of the other game. Buying her might entangle him with that storyline. After thinking it through, Xenon decides to go for it anyway. He walks confidently to the front and bids a staggering 10 million gold coins. The entire audience gasps. With that much money, one could equip an entire party with the strongest gear to face a final boss. Yet Xenon spends it all on one girl. The announcer asks if anyone will counter the bid. The hall falls silent, but one pudgy, sweaty loser in the audience is trembling, trying to muster the courage to challenge. Just as Xenon feels confident, the bloated man raises the bid to 10.5 million. Without missing a beat, Xenon counters with 12 million. The fat coward realizes his life savings aren't even close and angrily steps down, making Xenon Ula's new owner.
Later, after Xenon completes the payment, Ula sees her new master for the first time. She hugs him passionately like he's her long-lost father. Xenon is taken aback by the sudden emotion, but Ula clings tightly, promising to love him forever. In his former life, playing the other game, Ula wasn't this cheerful. She was rather expressionless, but here she's acting jolly like a puppy. Xenon wonders if this giddy personality is her true character, buried before she became a slave. Then he notices something alarming. Ula is dressed like a retired adult film star. If he walks around with her looking like that, his already terrible reputation will only worsen. He immediately asks the slave merchant for a change of clothes. The guy agrees and takes Ula to a changing room. She's reluctant to follow, but Xenon assures her he'll wait right there. A while later, Ula calls out that she's done. Xenon tells her to come out. She emerges wearing new shoes, but still the same short dress. Xenon is stunned and orders her to change properly. Ula insists she's happy with just the shoes. That's when Xenon notices a collar around her neck with his name branded on it. He doesn't like it and asks the merchant to remove it. The merchant politely suggests suggests keeping it, explaining that the collar proves a slave has an owner. Removing it would make her ownerless, which exposes her to serious danger. Ownerless slaves have no human rights. If someone kidnapped or assaulted her on the street, it wouldn't even be considered a crime. And since Ula is from the highly valued Oni race, many would try to steal her. Xenon remembers that demi-humans have extremely low societal status in the game. Without a collar, she'd face horrible treatment. But Ula tells him she doesn't mind the collar at all. She excitedly says it proves she belongs to him, so she actually likes it. Since she's fine with it, Xenon agrees to let her keep it. The slave merchant then points to a private room, suggesting they spend the night there. Xenon has no idea why they'd need a private room, but he agrees and enters with Ula. Once inside, she immediately removes her gown, revealing her two small horns, and insists they get straight to business. Xenon freaks out and orders her to put her dress back on. He explains that's not why he bought her. He only needs her for dungeon exploration. Ula instantly lights up and starts salivating like a starving dog at the mention of a dungeon. She leaps for joy, explaining she loves fighting and exploring dungeons has always been her dream. Slightly surprised by her excitement, Xenon reaches into his magic bag and pulls out a mountain of weapons and accessories she can use. Ula quickly changes into a comfortable, cheeky outfit. For a weapon, she picks a spiked club used by orcs and goblins, surprising Xenon. But Ula says she likes it and promises to use it on all her master's enemies. Out of nowhere, she hugs him again and tells him she loves him, completely catching him off guard. Xenon asks why she's so attached when they just met, and he hasn't done anything special for her. After a momentary pause, Ula shyly replies it's because she likes hot guys. Xenon is shocked. Ula nervously plays with her fingers, explaining she finds him really handsome and is happy to belong to such a wonderful guy. Her compliments confuse Xenon because at school, everyone is afraid of him, thinking he looks like a monster. But Ula insists he's exactly her type. She's into guys who look rough and casually mentions she fell deeply in love with him the moment she saw him at the auction. Xenon decides not to press further and suggests they head out. Ula happily agrees, so they leave the auction venue into the dark streets late at night. Xenon plans to walk home, even though it'll take about an hour, but suddenly Ula grabs his clothes and warns of danger. Xenon looks ahead and sees three thuggish dudes blocking the road. Glancing behind, he spots two more trailing them. In seconds, they're surrounded. The fat bidder from earlier emerges from among the thugs, apologizing sarcastically for his men's ill manners. Xenon angrily demands to know what he wants. The fat loser says he wants Xenon to join his party, but first he demands Ula be handed over. If Xenon complies, he promises to let him go with only a few broken bones. Xenon refuses, making it clear Ula is his woman. Ula is touched hearing him say that, but the fat chump just laughs and threatens that since Xenon chose the hard way, he has no choice but to end him. Xenon reminds him he's a noble and attacking him won't end well. The man doesn't care. He explains he needs Ula to achieve higher status. If he offers her to his boss, the boss will be pleased and might make him his right hand, guaranteeing his rise. The way the dude talks about his boss triggers Xenon's memory. He recognizes the fat guy from a kingdom called Chiron. The boss he speaks so highly of must be Sagittaros, the martial general of the Chiron kingdom. The chubby dude is shocked Xenon knows all about him and his boss, but Xenon knows more. He remembers that Sagittaros is a creep who likes girls of various races, capturing and caging them for his pleasure. In the other game, Holy Sea, the protagonist saves Ula from Sagittaros and they become companions. Realizing Xenon knows everything, the fat guy orders his men to eliminate him. They attack, but Xenon fights back. He realizes he's now meddling with the Holy Sea game scenario. Still, if it helps reduce the number of bad guys in the world, he doesn't mind. He tells Ula to get ready for her first job. Ula is beyond thrilled, like a bloodthirsty maniac. Xenon instructs her to handle the thugs at the rear. He pulls a grimoire of dark magic from his bag and casts a spell called Blood Carpet, summoning sharp earth shards that annihilate the punks at the front. After taking care of them, Xenon orders Ula to play with the ones at the back. Ula is excited and promises to slaughter everyone. The first thug, she shatters his skull with her spiked club. When the second tries to attack with a sword, Ula stops the blade effortlessly with the tip of her finger and smashes his head clean off. The last one begs for mercy like a pathetic weakling, but Ula refuses, insisting she must slaughter all her master's enemies. She kicks his head into the sky like a ball. After her brutal work, Xenon pats her head and compliments her on a job well done. The fat man, seeing all his guys dead, starts begging for mercy and tries to make a deal, offering Xenon any amount of money. Xenon tells him he's not a brokey and orders Ula to finish him off. Excited, Ula happily walks towards him with her club, but before she can
smash his head, an arrow flies out of nowhere and ends the man instantly. Xenon and Ula are surprised, wondering who attacked so stealthily. Then, from within the shadows, a dude dressed like a ninja suddenly appears with a menacing look on his face.
In the quiet of a shadowed alley, Xenon's voice cut through the silence, demanding to know the identity of the figure before him. The stranger, his face hidden behind a mask, introduced himself calmly. He was an assassin, he explained, a member of the Baskerville family's private organization. His employer was Lisbon. The logic he laid out was seamless. At auctions like the one tonight, guests were frequently ambushed on their way home. His task was simply to protect Xenon, the heir, as per the client's wishes. The assassin elaborated, his tone detached and professional. The auction house was more than a marketplace. It was a stage for the wealthy to flaunt their power, a high-stakes spectacle that often pushed desperate men to reckless acts. Buying an expensive slave without protection, he noted, was an open invitation to bandits. He confirmed that the guards Xenon had deemed unnecessary had already ensured the future heir's safety. His job here was done. With the situation resolved, the assassin returned his focus to Oza, signaling it was time to leave. He offered a quiet word of praise for her becoming her father's successor, a notion that held no interest for her whatsoever. Oza simply nodded in agreement. As they turned to depart, the killer remained on one knee, advising Xenon to be careful. He offered a final assurance not to worry about the bodies. His people would handle the cleanup. Xenon and Oza melted into the night, leaving the grand auction house behind. In the silence, one thought burned bright in Xenon's mind. He eagerly awaited the day he would meet the demonic beast, the Barghest, once more. Back in his room, Xenon lay on the bed fully clothed, a heavy sigh escaping his lips as the weight of the day crashed down on him. Only 2 weeks had passed since he had woken up in this world, and today he had killed for the first time. The strangest part was that he had done it without hesitation. It had felt necessary. Now, alone with his thoughts, he questioned himself. Was this his own cruelty emerging, or was he being influenced by the psyche of the original Xeno? He could understand why Oza, raised as a warrior, could take a life, but he had been an ordinary person. How could he kill and feel no guilt? He clenched his fist, staring at it, and asked himself who he had become. His mind drifted to the world of dungeon and prison, the game that was now his reality. In that world, enemies weren't just monsters. Players fought cultists, bandits, and criminals. He decided then to accept this new truth. In a prolonged battle, there was no room for hesitation. To defeat your enemies, you had to act without delay. With Oza by his side, he could finally begin exploring the dungeon in earnest. He sat up on the bed, considering his options. Oza's presence in his squad was a massive boost to their survival, but 2 attackers made the team unbalanced. They were missing a mage or a healer, but there was no rush. The main part of the scenario was just beginning. Standing before those majestic doors, he decided that if he was going to be greedy, he might as well aim high. His strategic planning was violently interrupted by a scream of pure panic. Master, it was Oza. She was covered head to toe in soap foam, her eyes squeezed shut in agony. In her panic, her foot slipped on the slick floor, and she tumbled forward, crashing headlong into a completely unprepared Xenon. My eyes hurt. The maid is tormenting me, she howled. Before he could react, a woman in a towel grabbed his arm. It was the servant Leviana. My eyes, she exclaimed, immediately demanding an explanation for why he was hugging his sister-in-law. Stunned, and suddenly finding blood trickling from his nose, Xenon could only freeze in shock. The chaos subsided as Leviana began washing Oza's hair, patiently urging her to rinse the foam properly. But Oza, refusing to let go of Xenon, clung to him, whining that her eyes still hurt. A wave of embarrassment washed over Xenon as he wondered how he could possibly make the ogre open her eyes and release him. Leviana told him it was impossible. The ogre tribe was incredibly strong, and trying to pry her off by force was futile. With a heavy heart, Xenon realized he had no choice. Suddenly, a seductive image of his sister-in-law appeared before him, beckoning him to join her in the bath. His shocked, embarrassed reaction did not go unnoticed. Leviana watched him and jokingly asked if he was blushing because of her, adding that he should be more ashamed of his feelings for his sister-in-law. Seeing his further agitation, she thoughtfully remarked that such a reaction must mean there was already a deep connection between him and Oza, a thought from which he recoiled in torment. Summoning his courage, he clenched his fist. Resisting was useless. He would go bathe, not to join Leviana, but because it was a necessary step to move past this trial. With the decision made, they headed to the bathroom, Leviana leading the way. Xenon agreed to go, inwardly groaning as Oza clung stubbornly to his back. Once in the warm, bubbly water, Leviana playfully splashed him, and he blushed a deep crimson. The three of them shared the large bathtub, Oza looking satisfied while Leviana winked cheerfully and gave a thumbs up, clearly pleased with how things had turned out. After the bath, a sleepy Oza, now in her pajamas, murmured that the warm water was pleasant and that she wanted to sleep with the master. Leviana immediately intervened, stopping her and explaining that a bed had been prepared for her elsewhere. Oza stubbornly refused, her voice rising in protest. But it was Xenon's own silent, desperate protest that ultimately shaped the compromise. Later, Xenon lay in his luxurious bed, eyes wide open, squeezed between a sleeping ogre girl and his sister-in-law. He realized this was the compromise, and he could not fathom how he would possibly fall asleep in such a situation. One desperate thought echoed in his mind. What kind of trial is this? He woke with a start, the memories of the previous night's bathing ordeal flooding back. He swore to the gods that he had done nothing, touched no one. When sunlight flooded the room, he sighed with relief, grateful that morning had finally come. But he remained trapped in bed, pressed between his sleeping sister-in-law and Oza, who clung to him tightly. A wave of despair washed over him. Could this really become his reality? Every day, he silently begged forgiveness for whatever sin had led to this. His mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. What if he had made a move on Leviana? How would Oza behave? He didn't know if she would be frightened, avoid him, or perhaps even be interested. The most terrifying part was that one of the options was simply unpredictable. His sister-in-law stirred beside him. His gaze jumped to Oza, who was murmuring in her sleep, asking him to hug her. He reminded himself that he had bought her as a weapon, not out of affection, and had no intention of pursuing her. He didn't know how to respond to such requests. His thoughts scattered when Oza shifted, revealing her bare legs. He blinked, stunned, and suddenly doubted her age. She seemed older than he had initially thought. His mind raged with frantic, conflicting thoughts. Could she be at an age where his attention would be acceptable? Lack of sleep and constant stress clouded his judgment. Just then, Oza's eyes fluttered open. She rubbed them sleepily and greeted him with an innocent, "Good morning, master." Her innocent greeting shattered his torment. He sighed tensely as a drop of sweat rolled down his face. There was no doubt she was just a child. The realization brought a strange, unsettling relief. At that very moment, another voice chimed in. His sister-in-law was already awake, cheerfully saying good morning and gently touching his cheek, asking if he had slept well, completely unaware of the chaos she had stirred in his soul. He recoiled from her touch, stunned. This whole situation was simply too much. Later, at the dining table, Leviana placed a full breakfast before Oza, her professional composure a stark contrast to the morning's chaos. Dressed in his formal academic uniform, Xenon announced he was leaving. Turning to Oza, who was also in uniform, he reminded her that they were going to the academy and she must remember what she was taught yesterday. She exploded with energy, raising her fist and promising she would cause no trouble. Xenon watched her, thinking that bringing her to the Royal Academy was a decision made from the beginning. For the nobility, it was customary to have servants and guards accompany them. As they walked along the rough, forest-covered path leading away from the city, his thoughts continued. The Academy's program included dungeon research and monster taming, so he would have to take Oza on those dangerous excursions. As they approached the waiting carriage, he issued a final warning. Any trouble at the Academy, and she would not be allowed on the premises. With a broad smile, Oza readily agreed, assuring him she would behave as best as possible, just to stay with the master. The carriage door shut firmly. Inside, Oza pressed her face to the window, admiration blooming on her face as the city streets flew past. The journey began. Xenon sat opposite her, arms crossed, a gloomy expression fixed on his face. Oza, completely unaware, knelt on the seat to get a better look, humming a cheerful tune. His stony silence didn't change, and her joyful song grew louder, a simple melody about going to school with the master. Finally, he spoke, asking why she was singing so strangely and what had made her so happy. Turning to him, she continued singing, explaining that it was because her home was full now. Throwing his head back, Xenon looked at her, hesitating. Was it really right to take her with him? She was so simple. Oza, are you having fun? She leaned forward, eyes shining, and threw out an enthusiastic yes. Her song continued, but her face shifted. A chilling, predatory light ignited in her eyes. A toothy smile unfolded on her lips as she sang the last, terrible line. and carve them out." The eerie words hung in the air, and a deep anxiety descended on Zenon. Their carriage rattled to a stop before the majestic facade of the Royal Academy. After a long night, he was overwhelmed by a strange unease, unable to shake the feeling that another wave of upheavals was about to begin. A decorated carriage stopped before the majestic facade of the Academy. Zenon Baskerville stepped out, followed by the young half-human Oza, who jumped down from the footboard, full of restless energy. 3 nearby students turned to look at their noticeable arrival. One instantly recognized the emblem on the carriage, whispering to the others that it belonged to the Baskerville family. Oza stepped forward and instantly became the center of whispers and watchful glances. The students around pointed at her horns and collar, calling her a demi-human slave. Zenon, walking behind, had prepared for a spectacle, but she was getting far more attention than he had expected. Oza, however, simply shone with joy. Her face glowed as she smiled and told Zenon how happy she was to accompany her master to the academy, cheerfully announcing that she would escort him. His face tensed with anxiety. He quickly told her she didn't know the way to the classroom and ordered her to quietly follow him like an adult. With the command given, Zenon strode forward decisively, cutting through the sea of curious students. Oza fell into step right behind him, obediently following. The other students watched them go. Someone muttered about Zenon's eerily emotionless face. Oza, in contrast, looked around her new surroundings with wide, sparkling eyes full of admiration. She was from the great continent of half-humans, lands beyond human territories. Her people were a warrior race bred for battle. The open question remained, could such a person truly adapt to communal life at the academy? She whistled a cheerful melody, trying to calm him, saying everything would be fine. She was just a companion and would cause no problems. But her face suddenly filled with anxiety as she noticed him clenching his side. She tugged his sleeve and asked if her master's stomach hurt. He gently stroked her head, dismissing her worries. He had just gotten a little lost in thought. He sternly warned her that from now on, she must avoid anything that even slightly smelled of trouble. If Oza just obeyed, he assured her there would be no problems. Walking towards the academy building, he suddenly realized he had forgotten one very important thing. He angrily stomped his foot, thinking that trouble isn't always what you look for. More often, it comes to you. The premonition came true instantly. A sharp voice shouted his family name. Baskerville. Leon Praise stood before him, ready for battle, and declared that trouble had indeed arrived. He pointed an accusing finger and demanded an explanation of what Zenon was doing with a little girl in a slave collar. He called him a villain, a man who could not be ignored. He saw himself as Leon the Brave, a hero of justice, ready to risk his life for a stranger, and he would not allow himself to stand aside and watch this injustice. His anger flared as he recalled the recent adventure in the dungeon. He admitted he used to think Zenon wasn't so bad because he had helped classmates, but this was proof he was wrong. He shouted that Zenon was exactly as he seemed, a real bastard, a creator of pointless problems. The scuffle attracted the attention of other students in the academy courtyard. A crowd gathered as Zenon just clicked his tongue. He found it all boring. Meanwhile, another student stood aside, watching closely and analyzing the situation. According to the script, Leon was supposed to defeat the Demon Lord and save the world. So, he couldn't allow Leon to be distracted by this incident. He wouldn't let himself lose the chance to become a hero. Under the spires of the academy, the tense confrontation between Zenon and Lion simmered. The observer's inner irritation finally exploded. Why must Zenon interfere with Lion's path? He grabbed his head, cursing his fate. Reality, he realized, was nothing like a game. Unexpected events kept disrupting the plot. He saw Oza, a colorful girl, and thought she must be freed, but then recognized the true source of the problem, Lion himself. Suddenly, the academy director intervened, addressing the crowd. He announced that Zenon had followed all legal procedures in buying his slave girl, and the school had given official permission for her to accompany him. The students around were shocked and outraged. The director told Leon directly that he had no grounds for complaint. Zenon crossed his arms. Suddenly, a cynical thought flashed in his mind. How much would Leon pay for her? What was the price of her freedom? From his detached perspective, the gamer protagonist thought that all RPG heroes were like that. They always chose the picturesque detour. He found it amusing, but admitted that the main hero should behave that way. Bringing his attention back to the scene, Zenon sharply told Leon, go away. He placed his hand on Oza's head and declared that he would not sell her for any money. She was his important slave and subordinate. Finally, he said he was going to class and turned away. Enraged by the refusal, Leon rushed forward, shouting that Zenon was an idiot because he still didn't understand. He grabbed him by the shoulder and sharply turned him around. He threw a punch, catching Zenon off guard. But before the blow could land, an angry scream tore through the air. Oza would not forgive anyone who dared lay a hand on her master. It was a foolish move. Attacking in front of a crowd of witnesses put Lion in an extremely disadvantageous position. With incredible agility, Oza suddenly leaped into the air, swinging a huge spiked club, its size unbelievable for such a small body. Leon and Zenon stared upward, completely stunned by her sudden, violent intervention. With a furious roar, she brought the weapon down between them. The mace struck the stone pavement with destructive force, shattering the ground and sending cracks in all directions. Leon recoiled backward, his face a mask of disbelief. She stood over the crater, her red eyes blazing with protective fury. She growled that she would not allow her master's enemies to escape and swore to beat them all to death. With a loud crash, she brought down her huge mace again, growling that she would splatter his insides. Leon, his face pale with horror, raised his hand and pleaded for her to wait, to calm down so they could talk. His sword barely held under the crushing force of her club. From the crowd, Shell Uranus shouted to Leon to stop, saying Oza was not his enemy. Under enormous pressure, Leon shouted back that he just wanted to free her from slavery. Shell begged him to listen, but Oza's eyes remained cold and unyielding. There was no room for conversation. Her relentless assault raised a wave of panic. Students scattered in terror. Lion turned and fled, saving his life, and Oza rushed after him in hot pursuit, shouting for him to wait. Zenon watched this chaos, a drop of sweat running down his temple. He grabbed his head in despair. This was no time to stand idly by. He knew that a master's duty was to stop his mad assistant. With determination, he dashed forward, shouting at Oza to wait. She looked back with a wild smile and declared she would instantly kill her master's enemies. He shouted again, demanding she listen, but knew it was probably in vain. Once Oza entered a battle frenzy, she completely ignored the world around her. He could only watch as she rushed forward with a face of pure bliss. Chaos intensified. Screams and panic filled the air. Students pushed and scattered, shouting for everyone to run, for someone to call a teacher. He realized he had no choice. Only he could stop Oza. He could not allow his master to die in such a place. Gathering his resolve, he roared, "Pull yourself together." With a fierce scream, Oza swung her club, bringing it straight down towards Lion's chest. But a moment before the blow, Zenon's hands shot forward and grabbed the heavy weapon. The force of the strike instantly vanished. Oza and the spectators froze in stunned silence. He did not let go. A wave of energy rushed through him. Lion's face contorted in a silent scream of pain. Shock threw him to his knees, his body convulsed, and foam burst from his mouth. When he suddenly collapsed, the crowd gasped in horror, unable to believe their eyes. Ignoring the crowd, Zenon turned to Oza, who was still ready to fight, and sharply ordered her to stop. This must be the last strike. Nearby, Shell Uranus exclaimed in surprise, asking what was happening. Oza stood embarrassed by the order. Zenon addressed the stunned crowd, waving it off and calling the whole affair a pleasant misunderstanding, sneeringly noting how shameful it was that it happened in broad daylight. He told Oza it was time to go. The other students could only mutter awkwardly as Aerith and Shell watched this strange scene unfold. Before leaving, Zenon offered one last, deep apology to those present. On the ground, Leon lay completely broken. His suffering seemed to have come to an end. The main character had been thwarted. After the clash, two people in uniform carried Leon Pre on a stretcher, his body limp. Nearby, a student tried to explain to a worried Shell Uranus, saying that Lion had suddenly become cruel, but only because he was attacked by a little girl, Baskerville's companion, who fought back. The student dryly added the girl was simply stronger. The incident instantly became gossip among the students gathered near the academy gates. Whispers spread about whether Lion had broken the rules. The academy director was immediately summoned. He admitted that Lion was not without fault, but sharply reprimanded Zenon for defending himself too strongly and forbade him from causing further trouble. When they were alone, Zenon snapped at Oza, grabbing her by the face and warning her to never cause trouble at the academy again. She agreed without hesitation, and he softened a little, telling her to be careful and confessing that it hurt him, too. With that stern warning delivered, Zenon brought Oza with him into a huge, multi-level lecture hall and sat among the other students. As he settled in, a smiling student with shaved sides approached him, addressing him as Baskerville. Zenon looked confused, not recognizing him. The boy immediately reminded him that Zenon had saved him during the gargoyle attack. Shell and Eret, from their seats, noticed the friendly gesture and quietly whispered about that event, recalling that Lion, although unpopular, was actually a good person who only tried to stop Zenon from hurting Oza. Meanwhile, the friendly student walked alongside Zenon and Urza, asking if he was being too annoying. Zenon gave a mysterious reply about feeling the urge to put a collar on a sweet girl, but considering it a crime. The student cheerfully remarked that for a person with such a handsome face, Zenon's constant frowning was a real mystery. Next to the stone-faced Zenon, Oza shone with joy. Since Zenon had saved him, all the students' negative feelings towards the Baskerville family had disappeared. But his praise was cut short. A girl with a high ponytail excitedly shouted, called Oza cute, and rushed to hug her. Other girls instantly swarmed around, ready to pet her, wanting to stroke her as if she were a tamed pet, which clearly annoyed Zenon. Only one student leaned over and explained that the girl, Alice, simply adored small animals and didn't treat Oza like one at all. Zenon softened a bit, believing in her good intentions. Oza, realizing she was being compared to an animal, was struck by a funny shock, her eyes wide open. The friendly student patted Zenon's shoulder and said that being liked by a girl was a good thing, because for a woman to earn contempt was a terrible thing. This remark made Zenon think. He propped his chin on his hand, gloomy from the sudden thought that Oza had been the root of the incident with Lion, and as her supervisor, the responsibility for everything might fall on him. In the lecture hall, the teacher announced the start of class. Students settled into their seats. Alice energetically waved at Oza, who blushed in confusion and asked to be let go. Outside the academy, silence reigned. Leon was absent again. The curse that struck him was quite strong, and the healing magic used to treat him was powerful. In the noisy cafeteria, Zenon savored his lunch. His friendly classmate remarked that a week for recovery was a long time. Zenon, however, thought happily that since his noisy master had disappeared, he could finally enjoy a quiet school life. He noticed Shell Uranus looking at him angrily from across the room. Although she seemed to want to speak, he had no intention of engaging, and her angry expression dissolved into embarrassed awkwardness. Meanwhile, two more female students approached Oza with plates of cake, enthusiastically offering to share dessert, which greatly surprised her. Later, she joyfully ate a piece of meat, exclaiming how tasty it was. Thanks to this new popularity, Zenon noticed his status in the class had risen. More classmates wanted to talk to him. They surrounded her, offered more food, and said how cute she was, like a hamster stuffing its cheeks. Oza, blushing, protested that she didn't want to be treated like a child. Sunlight poured onto the academy building. In the dining hall, they talked again about Leon. The friendly student suggested it was no surprise he hadn't returned. Being beaten so badly could break anyone. Suddenly, Leon Praise appeared, pointing an accusing finger at Zenon and shouting that he was a fool for stealing someone else's slave. Zenon listened calmly, took a sip of his drink, and thought to himself that he had suspected as much. Leon was undoubtedly the type whose sense of justice burst out, a hot-tempered, fiery hero who often acted on impulse without thinking ahead. Zenon realized that the Leon before him was not the one he had seen in the game. In that world, saving enslaved children was considered a noble act. But this was reality, not a game. Following those rules made Leon a big problem. In manga or anime, such a hero might seem charming, but not here. It was clear to him that reality was not a simple story. Couldn't be divided into good and evil. There were too many shades of gray, and the thought that such a hero could call him a villain made him terribly angry. Zenon decided that Leon was just too serious and clumsy. Sometimes it was better to simply not pay attention to such people and turn away. That was exactly what he thought as he bit into his food. Meanwhile, at another table, one of the students noted that although Lion was a fool, he wasn't a bad person. Next to him, Alice cheerfully offered Oza some of her food. Zenon overheard and silently agreed. He hoped that someday he and Lion would find understanding. After all, both were moving step by step towards the goal of defeating the Demon Lord. He took another sip of his drink as Oza, surrounded by a mountain of empty plates, joyfully announced she was full. Xenon told her it was time to leave. After eating, they set off down a long, sunlit corridor. As they walked, a conversation outside caught his eye. He looked out the window and saw Leon and another boy talking to Eret. The other students looked satisfied. Leon was persistently asking Eret why she couldn't join them, trying to recruit her. Another student, glowing with excitement, invited her to his group. Leon fervently swore they would protect her, explaining they would be the vanguard, and as a healer, she would be safe. He begged her to at least try joining them on the next expedition, but she seemed hesitant. Looking out the window, Xinan recognized her instantly. It was Eret Centria, the Saint of Centria from the game, the main heroine and the only character with the unique healer sage class. He couldn't understand why Leon was so insistently trying to recruit her just for a dungeon raid. Oza tugged his sleeve and asked what had caught his attention. He watched as Ares stood confused, realizing what was happening. Lion and his partner stood before her. Lion insisted she wait, explaining that this was the decisive moment when she was destined to join his team. With a quiet sigh, she seemed to understand. He declared unequivocally that it was already decided. She would join them. His face was stern, leaving no room for argument. He took her by the hand and pulled her forward. Eret's initial surprise shifted to a gentle blush. She didn't look away from him as he led her through what seemed like a rain of petals, a barely noticeable smile playing on her lips. From the nearby window, Xenon watched with a knowing smile, feeling deeply moved to see this forgotten event with his own eyes. His self-satisfaction instantly shattered. His eyes widened in disbelief and he grabbed the window frame. Something had gone terribly and completely unexpectedly wrong. Through the window, he saw Leon rushing down the corridor, leaving Eret behind. As Oza shouted anxiously, asking why her master had stood up so suddenly, Xenon's mind spun from the unbearable sight. She stood alone. A single tear slowly ran down her cheek. With a trembling voice, she lamented that Leon was gone again. A picture flashed through her thoughts. He sat lonely and depressed. Her friends gathered around her in a field, their faces filled with anxiety. One asked what would happen now. Another wondered if Farida was satisfied with this outcome. And then, addressing the invisible Xenon, a voice directly asked him, "What should we do?" Rat Centria lowered her head and reluctantly agreed to go with them, but immediately emphasized only this time. Leon and another student told her not to be difficult, that they'd meet after school and prepare for the dungeon. Her hand squeezed the bow on her uniform, a quiet sign of unease. When they left, she looked back, her face full of anxiety. It was an unexpected turn. She was supposed to be a minor character, not the heroine. She suspected that Xenon had targeted her because of her noble origin, and his intentions were clearly evil. From the neighboring window, Leon watched them leave, his face a mask of pain. He didn't know what he could do. His companions laughed and mocked him because Xenon had turned his dear Eighth into stone. This thought threw Lion into an abyss of despair. Eighth would no longer be his partner. Xenon, watching from the window, thought this was a real nuisance, but so be it. He turned away and walked down the sunlit corridor, pressing his hand to his temple in irritation. Ursa silently followed. In the large lecture hall, students joyfully spent their break. One fiery young man waved to his friends, declaring he was running to the training ground, while others discussed an expedition to the sage's platform. Xenon sat watching, his eyes narrowed in thought, observing how Eighth was cornered by two accomplices. He clicked his tongue in boredom, watching as they decided to head to the lair of the Corpse King, a cave dungeon known to be difficult, supposedly suitable for beginners, mostly inhabited by golems. Xenon thought that with such companions, there was no real threat of death, but some bad premonition wouldn't leave him. His smoldering irritation finally burst out. He stood up sharply and loudly said he was bored and irritated. Staying here would only spoil his mood further. He decided to go to the dungeon alone to clear his head. As he turned to leave, Oza raised her eyes from behind the table and asked where they were going now. He irritably looked back, admitted going out was a nuisance, but said they were heading to the place of the sage's trials. She tilted her head and asked why he hadn't followed that woman earlier. The question caught him off guard. He sharply cut her off, asking why he would do that. With a sinister smile, she confirmed her suspicion, admitting he was right. Oza's eyes widened in curiosity as she persistently asked if he was worried, because he looked like he was about to rush into pursuit. She insisted that if he was going to chase them, he should hurry. Instead, Xenon put his hand on her head and explained he had never decided to chase them. Nothing special would happen. He added that Oza seemed to see more than just a fight, and this unexpectedly interested him. His thoughts drifted to Lion's companions. Although their actions didn't break the rules, It was a cunning way to capture hunting grounds, a typical tactic of the main hero's party. And looking at their goal, the lair of the Corpse King, he decided there was so little difficulty there that they would manage without his help, unless they were extremely unlucky. This definitively cemented one of the fundamental laws of the world he found himself in. The main heroine must be saved by the hero Leon, and the villain Xenon had no role in this scenario. He understood that intervening would be a fatal mistake. If he saved Eighth and took her away from the main hero, it would break the established narrative. Leon's resolute face flickered in his thoughts, reminding him of the hero's role. The burden of this knowledge settled on him, darkening his face. Ursula lifted her gaze, worried, and asked why he was so troubled. Every question pushed him straight to the source of pain. Deep down, he knew he wanted to help Eighth, but couldn't make that choice. The trauma of that game would haunt him forever. In a world where Xenon had defeated Eighth, Leon, consumed by hatred, would have risen as the Demon King. This memory fueled dark impulses. He imagined looking down on a helpless Eighth, fantasized about her despair, about taking what belonged to Lion. As he struggled with these thoughts, Azare admitted she didn't understand his problems. Then she offered the simple wisdom of her people. If an ogre is worried, something should be smashed. She continued laying out her straightforward approach. Stop worrying, find the enemy and beat them senseless. Think about other things later. And if you must worry, just find those who annoy you and crush them one by one. The brutal simplicity of her logic permeated the scene. A tear rolled from his eye as he clutched his head, stunned by how clear her thought was compared to his tangled mind. The tension broke, and he burst out laughing. He called her a person of battle madness, considering her advice useless but refreshingly absurd. He gently stroked Oza's head, a new determination shining in his eyes. He thought that sometimes it wasn't so bad to act like a fool and follow emotions without overthinking, like Leon. There was no need to worry about game scenarios or flags. And Oza, shining, simply and enthusiastically said yes. The decision grew from bitter disappointment. He didn't know how his intervention would affect the heroine, but he knew for sure he wasn't helping out of kindness. He was trying to repay the scenario, give Leon a moment of triumph, and avoid the death flag over Erida. But all this brought him only torment, and he no longer wanted to worry. With this new philosophy, wild energy ran through him. Taking Oza by the hand, he raced across the academy rooftop. He threw his fist into the air and laughed. He was a villain, so he would do as he pleased. Save those he wanted and crush anyone who annoyed him. And Oza, jumping alongside, thought it was a wonderfully simple plan. He declared it instantly. "Let's go," he ordered, pointing to their goal. Oza sharply raised her thumb, confirming she was under his command. Without further words, they leaped from the roof, beginning a rapid descent. Their destination was a place far from the manicured school lawns, a dark, ominous cave on the edge of town. As they approached the entrance, the deep darkness inside shuddered, and pairs of hungry, glowing eyes blinked open. Standing before the enormous gates, Tinnan recognized this as the lair of the Corpse King. With a smile, he ordered them to move forward. Oza willingly agreed, but their path was instantly blocked by a massive stone golem. She raised her huge spiked mace, ready for battle. Wasting no time, she immediately put her weapon into action. With a fierce cry, she brought the mace down on the lizard-like monster, roaring that it must be destroyed, and shattered it to pieces. Her ferocity knew no bounds. She became a true whirlwind of destruction, breaking through the horde of creatures, shouting that she would kill them all and grind them to dust. Xenon watched with a satisfied smile, noting her ruthlessness, and for a blunt weapon, her club proved brutally effective against these stone-skinned monsters. When the last monster fell, Oza rushed to him, shining with pride. "Master, I did it," she exclaimed. Xenon praised her excellent work. Now they stood by the stairs leading deeper underground. He assumed Lion Squad had a good head start, but this was a dungeon with dozens of levels. He warned Urza that the enemies from here would only grow stronger, and she nodded in understanding. Their descent into the dungeon began. As they walked, Xenon pondered their situation. So far, they couldn't catch up to Eighth and the others. And that trio, he admitted, looked quite capable on their own. Barely stepping deeper into the dungeon, Urza breathed heavily, standing over the trembling remains of the fallen stone creature. Nearby, Xenon called to her, a drop of sweat shining on his face. She turned to him with a bright, carefree smile and said it was nothing special. He, however, was unimpressed, remembering that since the gargoyle incident, she had not fought alongside him and seemed to have even forgotten basic techniques. He sternly ordered Oza to retreat, saying he would take on the next battle himself. Her cheerful mood instantly vanished. Her eyes widened in shock, and she protested, shouting that she could not allow her master to go into danger alone. Ignoring her pleas, he turned his gaze to a new threat emerging from the cave darkness. A gigantic, growling, wolf-like beast. To her protest, he challenged Oza, asking if she trusted him, and coldly added that if she couldn't protect him, she was useless. The wolf, with a crystalline back, lunged forward. He dodged to the side with a confident smile, seeing this as the perfect opportunity. The beast roared in despair and rose onto its hind legs. The monster swiped with its claws, but he effortlessly parried and dodged the blows, a predatory smile blooming on his face. He said he had already learned all its attack patterns. The beast crouched, gathering strength. He immediately recognized this move, the start of a charge before a lunge attack. With a roar, the monster lunged forward. Its huge jaws snapped shut where he had stood just a moment ago, but he had already twisted away, completely unharmed. Leaping high into the air, he struck down powerfully from above with his sword, shattering the crystalline growths on the monster's back. The beast stumbled, its strength clearly diminished. With eyes narrowed in sharp concentration, he let out a sharp cry and began swinging his blade, delivering another devastating blow. He unleashed a final, devastating flurry of strikes. The blade moved faster than the eye could see. The crystal wolf's body was torn to pieces instantly, crumbling into a cloud of dark fragments. When the beast died, pure adoration shone on Earth's face. She turned to Xenon. "I wasn't worried. You are truly strong and worthy to become my lord." He told her that although it was a mid-level monster, his skill, abilities, and game knowledge allowed him to defeat it alone without magic. But he warned that the dungeon was still dangerous. They must beware of encounters, as they could be quickly overwhelmed. With that, they moved on, entering a cave littered with the remains of countless monsters, a harsh reminder of the dungeon's dangers. Oza excitedly lifted a found item resembling a ring. Their path opened into a huge, shining crystal cave, the 8th floor, the bedroom of the Tyrant King. Inside, Oza stood ready in new, lighter combat gear, a heavy spiked mace in her hands. Xenon warned her to be careful due to poor visibility, and she confidently replied that she would kill anyone they found. As they moved further, Oza suddenly noticed something in the distance and let out a piercing scream. She had found it. Xenon's gaze instantly turned to the movement, his face becoming stern. Her scream sharply turned their attention to a dark niche ahead, where a small group of figures huddled closely. The figures turned out to be 3 adventurers who instantly turned and fled in terror. One of them exclaimed in disbelief, "Why is there a monster here?" Xenon, seeing their retreat, pointed forward and roared something at them. His order was ignored, so he activated the Shadowbind ability. Tentacles of darkness burst from the ground, fiercely wrapping around the fugitives and throwing them back onto the cave floor. He loomed over the captured adventurer and demanded to know why he was here. With icy determination, he forced him to answer. Why did he flee? And more importantly, where was Eretcentria? The traveler stammered, saying he was just descending into the dungeon for things and materials, hadn't expected such a powerful monster to appear, and admitted he had no intention of leaving his companion, but still left him. Xenon listened, clicked his tongue, irritated by this unexpected encounter. Tired of him, he ordered Oza to move, and she willingly complied. The bound men panicked, shouting for him to wait and free them from the magic, calling him a fool for abandoning them. Leaving them to fate, he and Oza went deeper into the cave, their path strewn with the corpses of monsters they had already killed. He thought that if the adventurers were lucky, the spells binding them would disappear before some other monster found them. He considered abandoning companions a despicable act. He was walking and suddenly froze, eyes wide with shock at what lay in the chamber ahead. Before him loomed a colossal crystalline golem, a giant of mithril, its massive form filling the cave. The colossal beast swung its clawed paw, but the blow dulled against the hexagonal energy shield radiated by a young nun in a habit. While she tensely held back the attack, Xenon prepared a spell. He noted that this creature was stronger than the others. He ordered Urza Dronzer to buy time and dodge, not to engage in direct combat. He himself rushed forward, shouting to distract the monster. From the ground, the nun raised her eyes in disbelief. She recognized him. Baskerville. She implored him to run, insisted she could not defeat this monster. Zenon looked down irritably and said that in such a situation, one should ask for help, not order others to flee. Muttering that she had not changed at all since that game, he saw her sitting on the cave floor, lost in thought. She believed the spirit of a saint was to sacrifice oneself for the sake of others. She felt that giving her own life to help someone in need was the only meaning of her existence. She tugged Zenon's clothes, breathing in short gasps, begging him to run away. She insisted he should not sacrifice himself for someone like her, asking him not to worry about her or that girl, begging him to leave them to die. Zenon just looked down at her. Her words about self-sacrifice upset him. Irritated that she was still speaking that way, he grabbed her by the chin and brought a small bottle to her lips, ordering her to drink. After a minute, choking, she thanked him, but immediately offered to give herself up to buy him time to escape. This gesture sparked a flash of irritation in Zenon. He decided then and there that he would have to discipline this foolish woman. He exploded with rage, his voice sharply cutting through the air. "Who is this insolent woman?" he hissed, demanding to know who would even listen to her. Eret stared at him, shocked and silent. While a battle raged in the distance, Zenon swore he would make her say the words "help me" and truly save Eret. With the giant mithril roaring behind him, Zenon stood before Aeth, his voice tightening with despair. He warned that if things continued like this, they would all die. He demanded to know why she would not allow him to die instead of her. He roared that her low self-esteem made it sound as if her life was worthless. Aeth could only stammer, unable to answer. The root of her sacrificial nature lay in the past. In childhood, she and her mother were attacked by bandits. To protect her daughter, Aeth's mother created a powerful barrier, a spell that slowly consumed her own magical energy. Her powers were fading. She knew that if she continued, Aeth would die, but she could not bring herself to break the barrier, even at the cost of her own life. The memory culminated in a field of graves where a young Aeth stood and cried over her mother. Having survived at the cost of her mother's life, she stopped valuing her own and lived only for others. Zenon's voice echoed this thought. He cried that she rejected chances for happiness, although she was the one who deserved to live. At that moment, he yelled at her to stop being a fool. He said her devotion to God was just an excuse, a way to give up on herself because of her parents' death. He accused her of thinking she must die for the suffering to feel even a little better and demanded she pull herself together. He continued, saying that since Leon was here, he was the one who should be saying such things. His words hit Eret, and she flinched noticeably. In Zenon's mind, a true determination ripened. He would not tolerate a story where the heroine died for the sake of others. Since he had been transformed into this world, he would not allow the heroine to be unhappy. For her sake, he would destroy every tragic ending, even if he had to become a villain or a hero. He grabbed her, his eyes burning with fierce determination. He said her past life, lived only for others, was in vain. He forbade her to even imagine, with any pride, that someone so worthless could ever make another person happy. He held her captive, mocking her, asking what she wanted to do, what she liked, if she had any hobbies. He threw in that, if she didn't want to die, she should behave like the weakling she was and beg for help. Tears rolled down her face as she recalled the past. Having survived at the cost of her mother's life, she desperately didn't know where to seek salvation now. At that moment, Zenon grabbed her, his face very close. He said that asking for help was a privilege of the weak, and since she was weaker than him, he demanded she bow her head quickly and beg. Overwhelmed with emotion, she folded her hands as if in prayer, tears still flowing. Finally, she whispered her request. "Please help me." His reaction was theatrical admiration. Zenon struck a pose and exclaimed that beautiful women were so pathetic when they cried, and because of that, one wanted to protect them. Aeth, stunned, called him shameless. He brushed off her word, turned away with a triumphant smile, and suddenly a strange vision of confetti and cherubs appeared around him, leaving Aeth with a premonition of trouble. He refocused on the fight and ordered Aeth to drink a potion to restore her magic. He said that together they would defeat this giant monster, and he needed her help. Aeth agreed, but pointed out the creature's terrible power, which had wounded everyone else without a scratch. Zenon only smiled and said he had a plan for cowards who would abandon a woman and run away. He glanced at the battle, Urza fought with all her might, but even her powerful demonic mace barely harmed the crystalline creature. The giant mithril stood unshakable. Xenon mentally acknowledged its incredible hardness, remembering it from the game. This confirmed his suspicion that this was no ordinary monster. Everyone knew the idea of a safe dungeon was a lie. Surprises were always possible. In any dungeon, no matter how familiar it seemed, there was always a small chance of encountering a dangerous creature, a monster whose strength far exceeded that of the dungeon itself. These monsters often had unique and deadly skills. Xenon, battered and bleeding, returned to Aeth and ordered her to heal the half-human Oza. When he said he would start casting a spell, Aeth interrupted him, her face filled with despair. She insisted it was useless. Magic did not work on that monster. Despite her protests, Xenon smiled contemptuously, clearly indicating he knew exactly what kind of creature it was. He knew the body of that dangerous monster was covered with mithril, or he explained that it was precisely because of mithril's high magical resistance that magical attacks did not affect it. With a fierce expression, he ordered her to be silent and simply follow his commands. Meanwhile, another member of their group knelt. The woman dressed as a healer directed her power. A glowing circle of runes flared around her, and she began to cast enhancement spells sequentially. Heal, strength up, guard up, stamina charge, and rabbit foot. The effect was immediate. In their squad, the elven warrior felt a sudden surge of vitality. The wound on her leg vanished in a flash of light, and she exclaimed with renewed energy that she was ready to continue the fight. Xenon reproached the healer. Your job is to heal and support, not to stand on the front line and be a shield for others. Why do you refuse to use your own powers? She looked back at him, her determination unwavering. Despite his words, she simply didn't want to see anyone else suffer. He snorted with contempt and cut in, saying that if someone got injured, her job was to heal them. And he emphasized once again that the healer's place was in the rear to cover the fighters on the front line. Having decided this, he focused again on the mithril giant. He stepped into the center of a large, intricate magical circle, taking advantage of the creature's bad temper and weak defense, a perfect target for a first kill bonus. But the magic he wanted to use didn't work under usual conditions. A memory surfaced of a scholar explaining the unique system of this world. It wasn't built on levels, but on a mastery model. To use new magic, one first had to acquire a grimoire, learn the spells, and then train mastery to master the skills. But the grimoire in his hand revealed an important loophole. It was possible to learn even the most powerful spells regardless of mastery level. And he emphasized that without the necessary skill points, the spells simply wouldn't work. He smiled, electric energy crackling around his hands. He admitted the system was capricious, but that was exactly why it fascinated him. He stated there were two ways to defeat the mithril giant. The first way was a simple frontal assault, a battle of attrition that many others had clearly lost, their bodies now littering the battlefield. The second method was magic. He revealed the truth. The belief that magic was negated by mithril was a deception. In reality, if a creature took enough magical damage, its mithril armor would crumble, exposing beneath it only a simple golem. He had obtained this key information from a strategy guide, a detail that had misled many other players. To exploit this weakness, he took out a special paid item, a bottle of doping. He sharply clenched his fist, broke the vial, and absorbed its contents. The power of the bottle surged over him. His skills temporarily soared. A complex magical circle appeared under his feet. The healer and warrior watched with wide eyes in amazement. He directed this newfound power, gathering it into his open palm. A vortex of pure dark energy swirled, pulsating with incredible force and reaching its deadliest peak. When the whirlwind became unstable, he leaped into the air, shouted a warning to the elven warrior, Oza, to get back, and declared that in his current state, he could now wield the most powerful dark magic. He released the spell in the air above the giant mithril. A huge, complex magical circle appeared. He proudly proclaimed that this magical abyss gate was a power commanded only by him and the Demon King. The gates of the abyss opened, engulfing the colossal golem in a blinding sphere of light pierced by twisting tentacles of dark energy. The creature was trapped, its silent body contorted as if frozen. Under the incredible pressure of the spell, the crystal armor of the giant mithril suddenly cracked and crumbled into pieces. Fragments of its body flew off, exposing a dark mechanical frame from inside, and it began to completely disintegrate. Its crystal form could not withstand the power of the abyss, and the massive golem shattered, its body scattered into countless fragments under the stunning force of the spell. When the last remnants of the monster disappeared, the elven warrior joyfully exclaimed that he had done it, and calling him her master, rushed into his embrace with tenderness. Zenon, pale and exhausted, silently confirmed that the conquest was complete. The one who was not a healer looked at them and got lost in thought, recalling her mother's words, that someday she would meet her destined one and must give him everything. She was torn from her dreams by Zenon's cry of pain. He groaned that his whole body ached from the backlash of the doping drug. The one who was not a healer approached and sharply grabbed him by the ears, scolding him that it was his own fault for such carelessness. Zenon exclaimed, asking if she had said something. She stammered, whispered no, and turned away, burning with shame. Skipping Eret's words turned out to be a fatal mistake. This would become clear a little later. From this, a new path began. The huge crystalline cave stretched into the darkness, its floor strewn with fragments of the great battle, broken weapons and abandoned armor lying like silent witnesses. A dungeon encounter medal of conquest, a special item received as proof of victory. He thoughtfully considered that, like in a game, there must be some vendor that would exchange it for something truly valuable. He wondered if this world operated by the same laws. Having made a decision, he turned back to exit the cave. His companions followed closely, the elven warrior and the one who does not heal. He asked if they were ready to return. Their path was blocked by a swirling whirlwind. Two students were trapped inside, screaming in horror, calling out the surname Zenon Baskerville, desperately begging him to release them. Zenon, however, turned away with a contemptuous sound, irritated by their persistence. He thought to leave them to fate. The non-healer stepped forward, called him by name, and asked if he had just uttered his own name in a curse. She reminded him that she had bought him for service and questioned whether he was worth that price if he wouldn't even help. He turned to her with a threatening look. Although he admitted that they had abandoned their squadmates, he insisted that, as an academy student, his job wasn't to punish other students, and his personal beliefs gave him no reason to do more for them than necessary. She decisively countered his arguments, insisting that he should not dirty his hands for those like them, and begged him not to ruin his reputation even more. He stopped, catching every word she said, and realized with horror that if it became known he had fed monsters with classmates, he would be expelled from the academy, and the friends he had managed to find might turn away. With a simple, sharp snap of his fingers, the mighty whirlwind instantly dissipated. The two students fell sharply to the ground, barely catching their breath. Zenon turned to the stunned woman, who was not a healer, with a cruel smile and mockingly said that as a saint, she should not cause him such unnecessary grief. Her eyes widened in shock. She stammered, "Me?" Meanwhile, somewhere else, the young horned girl Oza, dressed in new battle gear, had a hood placed on her head by Zenon, which she accepted, blushing. Full of energy, she exclaimed that she was bored and ready to fight several enemies. The nun, however, was clearly confused by the recent turn of events and hesitantly stammered. While Zenon calmly waved his hand, brushing off her worries, Urza stood nearby and looked up at her. Then she gathered her resolve and spoke confidently. She explained that she did not intend to save the other students. Zenon was her patron, and it was him she intended to protect. It was her honor, she insisted. While she spoke, a monster struck Oza and threw her aside. The statement hung in the air, and a tense silence fell between them in the cave. Meanwhile, Oza was already in full swing, cheerfully collecting coins and other loot while monsters were mercilessly slaughtered around her. Zenon broke the silence, noticed the nun's sudden boldness, and with a smile asked when she had appointed herself his guardian. Then he turned away and called Oza to return. She immediately obeyed and happily ran back to him, proudly showing her bag, now overflowing with sparkling crystals, insisting that her master see all the things she had gathered. He praised her, gently stroking her head for a job well done. Urza beamed with happiness, and the nun watched this tender interaction with surprise. He walked ahead on the stone stairs and inwardly agreed, but her closeness overwhelmed him and seemed almost sinful. He reminded himself that he had never allowed her to do everything as she pleased, and now she was living that way, insisting that he answer for his words. He was desperate, didn't understand how it had all happened, and blamed himself. He thought that this scene should have taken place between the hero Leon and the sage Eret, not him, because he had mistakenly taken the role of the hero. Changing the subject, she directly asked about him. She recalled the last words of Ereta's mother, spoken before her death, about how she would have given everything to her destined companion, who was was to become the hero's support. The nun said that Zenon behaved exactly as that woman would describe the hero. This revelation horrified him. He screamed inside for her to stop. He insisted he could not possibly be a hero. He wondered what last will Erida's mother could have left. He was convinced this was a colossal misunderstanding. She calmly continued, if he was not a hero now, maybe he would become one. She said that whether he would be a hero or a villain depended entirely on his will. Then she made a stunning statement. He was destined to bring the world to ruin. Her words left him completely stunned. He grabbed his head, racking his brains because he was sure he had never had any life consultation with some unknown fortune teller. He tried to push away her hand, but the non-healer just raised her eyes to him, a light blush coloring her cheeks. His eyes bulged in shock. She did not retreat. Instead, she firmly clung to his leg with unexpected strength. Her face softened with quiet devotion. She said that if he was a hero, then she would become his guardian angel. She swore to give him her whole life, to be by his side as his wife, in sickness and in health, in sorrow and in joy, unchangingly, because he was the one she was destined to be with. He looked back, completely confused. He realized that such a dialogue had never appeared in the game. She pressed against his chest, and Oza clung to him from the other side. He tried to pull himself together, repeating to himself to calm down and not focus on these feelings. He could not believe such an unexpected turn of events. The nun, looking at him with adoration, said she was tired. Zenon, sighing, offered to carry her. Step by step, they advanced through the spacious dungeon. Ursur settled comfortably on his shoulders, and nearby Eret barely walked. The nun took her hand and quietly calmed her, saying she was safe. The nun's hand stretched out, pointing to the dazzling light at the end of the long stone corridor. She turned to Zenon and said they had cleared another dungeon. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the exit. At that moment, the nun pressed close to him. Her stomach growled, and she quietly whispered that she was hungry. He sighed quietly, burdened by the two companions who now clung to him. Sitting on a throne of defeated enemies, he recalled his path. The idea of following a ready-made script only provoked laughter. He refused to be easy prey, would not let the world fall, and resolutely forged his own way forward. His thoughts turned to his comrades. Oza, who had finally found friends, passed through the dungeon with new confidence, a clear sign of her growing up. He had gained not only her loyalty, but new powerful allies had joined him. The devoted one who does not heal, the wise Eret, and the formidable Najisa. With these thoughts, the group finally exited the dungeon. As soon as they stepped outside, the bright light of dawn greeted them, and Zenon realized it was already morning. Before them stood the majestic, exquisite gates of the academy, as if welcoming their return to civilization.